Let me be completely honest with you. What you just watched was not a standard basketball play. That was a mutiny in slow motion. It happened in front of 20,000 people, live on national television. It was gift wrapped with a Caitlin Clark three-pointer that iced the game, giving the Indiana Fever a victory they never should have struggled to get. I am Dre Fiber. This is Legacy Heat Hoops. Today we are peeling back the curtain on what actually happened in those final seconds, because the narrative out there is only telling you half the story. The real unfiltered story. That is what we do here. No corporate spin. Just the raw, uncut truth of what is happening in the Indiana Fever locker room, on the sideline, and between Caitlin Clark and a coach who admitted she did not even design the game-winning play. Strap in. This goes deep, so let us start from the beginning. Context is everything. The Indiana Fever were up by 17 points. 17. You do not blow a lead like that by accident. You blow it with terrible adjustments and questionable rotations. And an offensive system so tired and broken that your opponent easily goes on a massive run. All while your head coach stands on the sideline with her arms crossed, looking like she just got terrible news from her accountant. That is exactly what happened. The Fever slowly bled that lead dry, and by the final possession, they were stuck in a corner they never should have been in. They needed a miracle play just to survive a game they should have put away on cruise control 10 minutes earlier. This is where things get fascinating. This is where the story stops being about basketball and starts being about something much more dramatic. Because in that final huddle, when the timeout was called and the board came out, the play being drawn up according to multiple sources, including one of Clark's own teammates on local radio, was actually designed for Kelsey Mitchell. Kelsey Mitchell was the top option. The design was meant to get Mitchell downhill, either to pull up for a mid-range jumper or drive straight to the rim. That was the game plan. That was what Stephanie White and her coaching staff whipped up in those tense seconds when everything was on the line. Except that is not what went down. Personally, thank goodness it did not. Because I am not sure Kelsey Mitchell could have saved them there. She is a great player, a tough competitor, sure. But this moment had Caitlin Clark written all over it from the start. The basketball gods designed this script. The real question was whether the coaching staff would get out of the way and let things unfold. Sophie Cunningham made sure they did. Let us give credit where it is truly deserved. Sophie Cunningham read that defense instantly, processed everything faster than the play design, and made a split-second decision that saved the entire possession. The inbound pass. That is where it begins. Sophie is holding the ball out of bounds, scanning the defense, and tracking Sonia Citron and Cody McMahon on the weak side. And what she spots is a massive miscommunication. Those two defenders get tangled up. They both chase after Lexie Hull instead of sticking to Caitlin Clark. Just like that, a window opens up. There is a tiny crack in the defense, just enough for a three-pointer. Sophie Cunningham, instead of forcing it to Kelsey Mitchell like she was told, reads the floor. She delivers a perfect pass to Caitlin Clark, steps back, and watches magic happen. Bang. Three-pointer. Fever win. And the absolute chaos that followed tells you everything you need to know about where this team stands. Now, here is the exact detail that shifts this conversation. Lexie Hull spoke on local radio right after the matchup. And she stated clearly, listen to this, that the final play was not exactly what they had drawn up. Not exactly. Think about that. If you are Lexie Hull, a teammate sitting on local radio being asked about that last possession, you could easily just say everything worked out fine. You could praise the team execution. You could say Caitlin Clark is just a bucket and leave it there. But she did not. She admitted it was not what was drawn up. By saying that, she opened the door to a story that was already waiting to explode. Here is the simple logic behind it. If getting Caitlin Clark an open three-pointer to win the game was not what was drawn up, then what on earth was the plan? If getting a clean look for your absolute best shooter in the clutch was a mistake, then the official play had to be for Kelsey Mitchell. There is no other explanation. The logic is basic. The play was not meant for Clark, but Clark hit the shot. Therefore, that shot was a complete departure from the design. Sophie Cunningham made it happen, and Caitlin Clark finished the job. This is not just a basketball breakdown. That was a rogue operation. It was two players looking at each other post-huddle and sharing a glance that says everything without a single word, and deciding they knew better than the instructions they just received. And they were correct, which is the most awkward part of this for Stephanie White. How do you discipline that behavior? How do you correct it? How do you walk into film study and say, we need to talk about you going off script, when that off script choice literally won the game? You cannot. And that is exactly the corner Stephanie White was backed into the second that shot ripped the net. In my personal opinion, Sophie Cunningham deserves absolute credit for making that read. People will naturally talk about Caitlin Clark hitting the shot, as they should, but Sophie made the critical choice that created it. She scanned the defense, ignored the call, and delivered. That is basketball IQ at the absolute highest level. A player trusting her eyes over a clipboard. And in that moment, she was completely right to do so. Now, let us talk about Stephanie White, because we absolutely have to talk about her. The post-game press conference alone could easily fill an entire episode. A reporter asks her point blank, was that the play you drew up? And how much confidence do you have in Caitlin Clark taking that shot? And Stephanie White's response is one of the most telling things I have heard from a head coach after a game in years. She basically admits, and I want to get this exactly right, that Austin Kelly drew up the design. Austin Kelly, her assistant coach. She instantly dodges the question about her own design, hands all the credit to Austin Kelly, and quickly tries to claim the execution was perfect. Let that sink in for a second. Your team just hit a massive game-winning three-pointer right at the buzzer. You are the head coach, yet your immediate response to drawing up that play is telling reporters your assistant coach was the one who did it. Dre's take on this? If your assistant coach is drawing up every final play, the out-of-bounds sets, and those last-second designs, then what is the head coach even doing in those crucial moments? What is Stephanie White actually doing during those huddles when Austin Kelly has the marker in his hand? These are real, serious questions. The Indiana Fever front office needs to ask themselves these hard questions right now, because from the outside, this looks incredibly bad. And this isn't a one-time issue. According to post-game reports, Austin Kelly has been the mastermind behind several late-game play designs for the Fever squad this entire season. That play giving Caitlin Clark her game-tying three against the Mystics, Austin Kelly drew that up too. That mid-range jumper Aaliyah Boston barely missed, also designed by Austin Kelly. He is doing all the heavy lifting when the game is on the line. Yet Stephanie White is the one taking center stage at the press conferences and grabbing all the media headlines. Her name is the one credited with whatever success this offense manages to find. From where I sit, that kind of coaching setup is getting impossible to justify. Look at what happened during the game itself, because it points directly to this exact same issue. Fever fans saw it clear as day. Caitlin Clark was standing at the scorer's table, ready to check back into the game, when Stephanie White suddenly told her to sit back down. Clark sits back down, but the expression on her face in that moment is not someone happily accepting a decision. That is the look of a star player biting her tongue so hard she can taste it. That is the look of someone who has dealt with this before, who is completely exhausted by it, and who is doing everything possible to remain professional when her patience is being tested to the absolute limit. Honestly, that exact exchange should have been the biggest headline of the night. You have a generational star like Caitlin Clark on a struggling team, and you tell her to sit back down when she is literally trying to win you the game. That coaching decision completely defies logic. It feeds right into the narrative of whether Stephanie White understands her roster or if she is just too obsessed with her own system, her rigid structure, and her way of doing things to adapt even when elite talent demands it. Here is the reality about Caitlin Clark that always gets drowned out by the constant media noise. She is not just some good basketball player. She is a generational superstar. She is the sole reason people watch. She is the spark behind those sold-out arenas, the reason the television ratings are through the roof, and the only reason the Indiana Fever remain a constant topic of national debate. You do not order Caitlin Clark to sit down when she wants to check in, and you do not draw up crucial game winners for someone else when she is in your huddle. You cannot run an offense this rigid and predictable, completely wasting your star's unique skill set, forcing your players to basically go rogue at the end just to get a decent look. None of this makes sense, and the fact that it keeps happening exposes a coaching problem in Indiana that a few lucky wins cannot cover up. Now look at the reaction after the because sports fans online have been dissecting every frame of it, and honestly, they have a point. Watch Stephanie White when that three drops. Watch her closely, because the reaction of a coach whose team just won a game on a wild buzzer beater when her players stepped up under intense pressure to deliver the exact result everyone desperately needed should be absolute joy. Pure, explosive, unbridled excitement, the kind of celebration we have seen from iconic coaches throughout basketball history when a shot drops to win the game. That is how she should have reacted. But she did not. Instead, you see a coach who looks like she is doing complex math in her head. She looks like someone calculating the immediate fallout of the win rather than just losing her mind celebrating the fact that they actually won. Sure, defenders will argue that is just her personality. They will say she is simply more stoic and composed on the sidelines than typical coaches. But look at the whole picture. Watch her expression right before the shot and her stiff body language the second Caitlin Clark releases the ball. That is not composure. That is the reaction of a coach who wanted a different play, watching a successful sequence she did not fully greenlight. Then watch Caitlin Clark head off the court. She daps up Cody McMahon, and they celebrate like they are back in their college days at Iowa. Back to a place where the system actually made sense, where the plays worked, and the game just flowed naturally. Then Clark walks right past Stephanie White. No eye contact, no acknowledgement whatsoever. She completely denies her that shared moment. Now, some skeptics will claim Clark was just lost in the high energy excitement and simply did not notice Stephanie White standing right there. Sure. But that excuse requires you to turn a blind eye to everything we already know about the icy dynamic between them. And it forces you to ignore what happens next because Clark immediately runs over to find Sophie Cunningham. And that, look, Caitlin Clark flashes to Sophie Cunningham right then speaks a totally different language than the one she had for Stephanie White. That look says it all. There is a whole history packed into it. It is the face of two players who agreed to jump, tore up the playbook, took a massive gamble, and actually pulled it off. This was no basic victory grin. It was a shared secret, a quiet nod between two teammates locked into a moment only they would ever truly get. Spin it any way you want, but Dre is calling it exactly like he sees it. Now, we have to talk about how fans and the press are reacting because the noise is deafening and it is almost all pointing one way. The Fever fans are still furious. Yes, they won. Yes, Caitlin Clark hit the game winner and saved the day. But the overwhelming feeling among supporters is that this coaching staff is fundamentally broken and things have been off for a long time. Nobody was walking away saying, "Great job, coach, nice adjustment," or "beautiful play design." Instead, the story is Caitlin bailed you out again, and she should not have to. That is the consensus. That is the echo across every forum, comment section, and sports radio show. This squad is winning matches despite their coaches, not because of them. Winning games that feel like a chaotic prison break where your star players have to scramble and improvise because the actual play call ignored them is no recipe for a championship run. In my personal view, this current Indiana Fever roster is easily one of the most gifted lineups in the WNBA. Think about it. You have Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston. There is serious depth, deep range, and versatility. On paper, they should be steamrolling everyone, but they are not dominating. They are barely surviving on improvised sequences and lucky defensive mix-ups rather than running a real structured offense. And that falls on the coaches, specifically the head coach. Stephanie White took over a roster overflowing with generational talent, yet she has spent all year holding them back instead of setting them loose. We are not talking about a small disagreement on tactics. This is a massive clash of core philosophies that will eventually tear them apart. And we might be witnessing the start of that collapse. In an alternate universe, Kelsey Mitchell takes the ball, drains a contested shot, and everyone goes home happy. Stephanie White celebrates a win from a play she actually designed. The media room is peaceful. Nobody asks tough questions about play calling, and the talk of a mutiny never happens. But that is not how it went down. Instead, what unfolded blew the lid off a massive issue that was already boiling under the surface, just waiting for the right spark to explode into public view. Ditching Mitchell to feed Caitlin, Lexie Hull calling it out on the radio, shifting credit to Austin Kelly, Caitlin ignoring White on the sidelines, and that loaded smile to Sophie. Every single clue fits perfectly together, painting a dark picture that is impossible to ignore once your eyes are open to it. And let us show some respect to Austin Kelly, because his name keeps surfacing for all the right reasons. When the game is on the line, he is the one drawing up the magic. The final second execution is his doing. Those clever baseline plays that get Indiana wide open looks under heavy pressure all year, also him, all him. If this team wants to make a deep playoff run, and they absolutely have the talent, Austin Kelly will be a major reason they survive. Eventually, management has to look in the mirror and ask why the best parts of their late game strategy are coming from an assistant rather than the actual head coach. Let us step back for a second and look at the real elephant in the room. It is the question everyone is thinking about, even if they are afraid to say it. Is Stephanie White actually the right fit here? I am not asking if she knows hoops. She obviously has a brilliant tactical mind. I am not asking if she is a good person. Everyone says she is. The real issue is whether she is the right coach to lead a franchise built entirely around Caitlin Clark right now. With so much on the line in this modern era of the WNBA, where every single play is dissected and every locker room interaction is analyzed to death. Judging by what we have witnessed this year, the rigid offensive system that kills all player creativity, the baffling rotations, the endgame sets designed by her assistant, and those viral sideline arguments, all of the hard evidence points to one clear, inescapable answer. And that answer is no. She does not fit. And the longer the front office avoids addressing this head on, the more this becomes a disaster that even a miraculous game-winning shot cannot save. Here is the cold, hard truth. Caitlin Clark cannot keep saving the day forever. Teammates can only improvise so many times before rival defenses adjust, before opponents sniff out the trick, and before that lucky breakdown in coverage simply does not happen. You cannot build a championship program on your stars constantly ignoring the official play design. That is not a real strategy, and it is certainly not a foundation. That is just highly talented players overcoming their coach's severe limitations through sheer instinct and willpower. Eventually, pure talent is not enough. The Fever secured a victory, yet the biggest story today is about everything falling apart behind the scenes. That says everything. Caitlin Clark is a generational star. Her teammates stepped up when the pressure cooked, and Austin Kelly is designing offensive sets that actually succeed. Meanwhile, Stephanie White stood at the press conference and publicly credited her assistant with designing the winning shot while describing the player's execution as absolutely perfect. Even though the players went on the radio and confessed they completely scrapped the plan. You cannot make this up. No Hollywood writers could write this drama. The reality inside the Fever franchise is wilder than any fiction I could possibly script. That wraps it up for today's episode here on Legacy Heat Hoops. If you stayed tuned until the very end, I see you, and I truly appreciate the support. Hit that like button hard right now. We need to get this out to every Fever fan, every WNBA follower, and every real hoop fan who wants the absolute truth about what is happening. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know, was this a totally rogue operation? Did Sophie and Cece blow off that play call on purpose? Is Stephanie White's time in Indiana ticking away? Tell me where you stand. Hit subscribe on Legacy Heat Hoops if you're not already with us. We don't sugarcoat. We don't play both sides to keep it safe, and we never give you that bland corporate sports news. We bring you the unfiltered truth every single time. I'm Dre Fiber. This has been Legacy Heat Hoops, and I'll catch you in the next one.